Now, many places around the world, we are seeing the economy basically implode on itself. And first, they started out telling us that, retail sales are bad because of weather, because it was going to online. And what we're seeing right now is that none of that is true. It looks like the everyday person, they're tapped out. People can't find high paying jobs. Wages are continually declining. And we're seeing out in the UK, and this is being reported by 100 retailers, saying that retail sales, they are absolutely awful. They fell by 1.2% between February and March, and they thought they were going to have a boost because they thought this was all because of bad weather. And guess what? It wasn't about bad weather. And we can see right now that all this is happening because the entire system is starting to break down. I mean, look here in the United States. They kept on telling us that, the retail stores are closing because everything is moving online. And we're starting to see that food establishments, well, they're closing down. Now, of course, people are going to say, well, they're moving to online because of Whole Foods and Amazon is part of that. Well, what about Subway? What about Tijuana? They're shutting down. I mean, Subway right now is closing an additional 500 stores in 2018. In 2016, they closed 359. In 2017, they closed 800. Now they're closing another 500. I mean, are all the sandwich sales moving to online and everyone's going to get their sandwiches from Amazon? No. What's happening here is people can't afford to go out and purchase food. This is why we see restaurant traffic declining. This is why we see the traffic in the malls declining. This is why we're not seeing a one-to-one ratio where everything is leaving the brick and mortar stores and moving to the online structure. It's not happening. And you can see as restaurants start to break down, well, that really paints the entire picture for us because it lets us know that it has nothing to do with online sales. Something else is happening. And if you look at the stats and you go back a little bit, you can see that in the beginning of this fiat system, guess what? Wages were increasing. We had inflation. Interest rates were high. At the end of the cycle, at the end of the entire fiat cycle, what do we have? Wages declining. Interest rates at the lowest point ever. Debt at the highest level we've ever seen. And everything's starting to break down because the everyday person is completely tapped out and broke. We see that mortgage rates right now, and this is going to be a huge problem. This is housing bubble number 2, and the rates are moving up. They are at 4.73% now. In a few weeks, they're going to be 5%, and then they're going to be 6%, and it's going to throw a lot of individuals out of the mortgage arena where they're not going to be able to afford a house. And this is why we're seeing mortgage applications continually decline. And this is going to continue on as time goes on. We've seen this before. This is nothing new. We've seen this prior to 2008. Back in 2006, going into 2007, actually starting in 2005, we saw the Fed, they were raising the rates. And guess what happened? Those people in the adjustable rate mortgages, they're living in their homes. The rates started to move up. They tried to lock in. It was just too expensive. They left their homes. Those people that were trying to purchase homes, well, it kicked them out of the market completely. And the Fed kept on raising the rates, and that started the domino effect, and the entire system started to break down. And we're seeing the same exact thing. And then, of course, as the system's breaking down, you find out the truth about everything else. The subprime securities, well, that was a complete lie. All these companies that were contained and there's no problems with them, there were huge problems. They needed huge bailouts. Banks needed huge bailouts. Everything was a complete mess. But up to that point, the Fed, the government, everyone believed what they were saying, that, yeah, everything is great. Well, everything was great until it wasn't. And then you learned that they've been lying all this time. And everything they told us, well, it was the opposite that was happening. We're seeing the same thing happen once again. And here we are today, and the pension crisis is much worse than we ever thought. Now, this is written by Aaron Brown, saying that today the hard stop is 5 to 10 years. Within the career plans of current officials, in the next decade, and probably within 5 years, some large states are going to face insolvency due to pensions absent major changes. If we extrapolate from the past, rather than use promises in the state budget, current employees plus the state will contribute about $25 billion over those 7 years, which could provide another few years before the till is empty. But it will also add around $60 billion of future liabilities to current employees. The system probably breaks down before the pension fund gets to zero. For example, if assets were to fall below $30 billion while projected future liabilities exceeded $300 billion, even the most optimistic people would have to admit the situation is unsustainable. This could happen in 3 years in a bad stock market, or perhaps 10 with good stock returns. Now think about what he's saying right here. If we had a bad stock market, if the market turned down right now, 3 years, all those people that were expecting their pensions, they're not going to be there. They're going to get pennies on the dollar. And if the market continually declines and credit freezes up and there are other problems in the economy, guess what? I don't think the pensions are going to be there at all. And most of the older generation, they're going to be sitting there going, where is all my money? What happened to it? And if they're not earning money and spending it out in the economy, and the younger generation, they don't have jobs, they're not earning the wages, what happens to the economy? Everything starts to fall apart. This situation that we're in is built on an illusion. Just like prior to 2008, when they told us that everything was fine, that everything was fantastic, it was built on a lie. They took that lie in 2008 and they created the biggest illusion that we have ever seen in our lifetime. They've created an economy made up of fake data, fake information, to make us believe that we have recovered. Nothing has changed. Everything is exactly the same. Actually, it's much worse because they didn't fix the problems. All they did was add more and more debt to the system. We know the banks are insolvent. We know the European banks are insolvent. We know these stress tests that the Fed has been performing and the ECB has been performing, they're completely fake, phony, and false to make us believe that everything is fine. And we know one small hiccup, and we know this from the central bankers, the IMF, the BIS, they've been warning that there is too much debt in the system. Remember, the central bankers, they don't want to collapse the countries. They don't want to collapse everything because everyone will point the fingers at them. They like to keep everyone on an even playing field, enough in debt where they can control the countries. They like to have that little even medium right there to make sure that you're in enough debt that they can control you and the people are continually enslaved to them, where they have to work harder and harder and harder to make ends meet. And the young generation, they're starting to realize that it's very difficult to make ends meet. Now, the older generation, they are supposedly getting their retirement from their pensions, but they're going to find out they're on the back end and there's going to be a huge amount of problems. But they've made their money during a period where we had incredible inflation, high interest rates in the 70s, where people were getting incredible returns on their CDs, where jobs were opening up, where credit started to flow freely. We went through the 80s and the 90s, and people who went through that time, who basically grew up in that time, who started a family, started a career, everything was great. Well, now we're on the back end, and the new generation that's coming up, they're not experiencing the same exact thing. Actually, they're experiencing the opposite of what everyone experienced during the late 70s. They're experiencing no jobs. They're experiencing wages declining. They're experiencing a huge amount of student loan debt. They're experiencing that there's no future for them. And this is going to get worse and worse as time goes on. We're already starting to see that banks, they're going to be starting to lay off a lot of people. And we see Deutsche Bank right now, they have announced a sweeping restructuring plan. And they're going to be laying off about 10% of their workforce. Because why? Because their revenues have tumbled by 17%. And we're going to see a lot of other banks and a lot of other corporations start to say, you know something, we're going to have to lay off. We saw this back in 2008. I mean, look at Subway. Look at Toys R Us. Look at all of these companies that had a huge number of people working for them. These people are going to be laid off. These people are going to need jobs. And it's going to be very difficult to find these jobs. This is how it begins. And it's just going to get worse because right now, the government, the Fed, they're keeping the illusion alive because once that stock market comes down, that gigantic Ponzi scheme, that illusion that they created to make everyone think that's the economy, once that starts to fall, that's when things start to fall apart. And people start to realize that, wait a minute, the economy was never strong. Behind the scenes, everything has been falling apart. All these numbers are fake. Everything they told us where real estate was increasing, it was never increasing in price. They created these bubbles. They pumped them up in 20 cities. And now what do I have? I have my home, and now it's worth very little. My wealth has just dropped. A lot of people are probably going to leave their homes because they just won't want to stay there, just like in 2008, 2009. So we're going to be going through this transition, and it's going to be very, very difficult for many people because they're not going to be prepared and ready to protect their wealth. And this is what you need to do. You need to protect your wealth. You need to have at least some gold and silver. And for those people who still argue about gold and silver, that it's not a store of wealth, go back 1,000 years and let me know what is better, the dollar, stocks, or gold to protect yourself. And I'm not talking about paper gold. I'm talking about physical gold just to hold when things go south and the dollar drops to nothing. Because we've seen fiat systems before. And once they drop to zero, guess what? It's game over. And those people holding gold, they're the winners. That's why China and Russia, that's why they've been accumulating a lot of gold. India, Turkey now has their gold back. Germany repatriated their gold. Hungary has their gold. All these countries, they want their gold back, and there's a reason why they want it back. They want the physical gold in their possession because this will maintain and sustain their country through an economic crisis. And they know there's one coming. The only people that really don't are those who are in the UK, throughout Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia. Many of the people believe that everything is fantastic. And they're not preparing, getting ready for when the system comes down. Remember, you don't find out the truth until everything crashes. Yes, we can be out here telling everyone that the entire economic system is a disaster. We can go through all the numbers. We can tell you that real estate is one gigantic bubble. We can tell you that they've been pumping it up in 20 cities, that the automobile loan scam has been going on for quite a while. They brought in a lot of subprime to boost the economy, to make it look like everyone's doing well. Now we have all these delinquencies. That retail is really affected by the people not working, by people receiving less money in their pockets for working. The wages are decreasing. We could tell everyone that. But no one will believe it until the system crashes. And when the system crashes, just like in 2008, when you find out that the subprime securities, they're not AAA, but they've been telling you this all along, and we find out they're garbage. The stock market crashes and the market comes down quite a bit. You find out that your retirement funds aren't there, which a lot of people found out. Then you see dealerships closing up. Pontiac went out of business. Saturn went out of business. You see a lot of stores closing up. You see people moving out of their houses. And of course, all those people say, well, why didn't you tell me? Well, we've been telling you. But you don't realize it until everything completely comes to a screeching halt, and then the truth comes out. That is what is going to happen this time. A lot of people are going to find out the truth when they're going through the economic collapse. Just like a lot of people found the truth out when they were going through the Great Recession of 2008. When you realized that I don't have a job. The pension that I had completely disappeared. The subprime securities, they were garbage. Why didn't anyone tell me this? Well, there were people telling you that. There were people out there telling you that was going to be a credit crisis. The same thing is happening right now. All of this stuff that we've been looking at points to a recession, depression. I believe we're in a recession already. But everyone is not going to acknowledge it until the stock market comes down. And then everyone's going to go, oh, we're going to have to lay off all these people. Oh, by the way, the corporations, they have no money. They haven't been bringing revenue in. We're going to have to lay off a lot of people. Ooh, we're finding out that the Fed, because of the audit, they've been manipulating the stock market. They've been pumping this up. It's completely fake, phony, and false. Just like the subprime securities when they told us it was AAA. The same thing is going to happen. But people are going to learn about it as they're going through the disaster. Wouldn't you rather be prepared before that time? Just like in 2008, wouldn't you rather be prepared and say, okay, I know that the subprime securities are AAA. I know gold is going to go up. I know the dollar is going to be in trouble. I know credit's going to freeze up. I know I need to offload my house right now because the prices of homes are going to come down. If you knew all that back then and you listened to those people that were telling you that, you would have made different decisions. But when you listen to the corporate media, listen to the Fed telling you that everything is fantastic, everything's contained, that the stock market's always going to just go up, and houses, they never come down, they're just going to continually go up, you can't get prepared. So what we're doing right now is trying to get as many people as we possibly can to get prepared for what is coming. Oh, and it is coming. Because the system, as we can see, is breaking down and it's accelerating. It's past the retail